Let me ask you this. Have you ever been in the middle of something that's supposed to feel really good, and instead of being present in your body, you are up in your head? And by that, I mean you're thinking, do I look okay? Am I taking too long? Should I be more into this? Should I have come already? Why haven't I come already? Why isn't it happening? And then before you know it, you're rushing through the experience, right? You're trying to get to the end instead of actually experiencing any of it. Today, we're going to be talking about the difference between being horny and being turned on, and how you can turn yourself on properly. And not just physically, but mentally as well. We're going to touch on feeling more confident within your own body, understanding how arousal actually works physically and mentally, and how slowing down might be the thing that completely changes your experience. And when I say slowing down, I mean slowing right down. And when I say that, I am talking about edging. And this isn't just about time with yourself, it's not about solo play alone. These are skills that you can build and practice with yourself that are going to directly improve your partnered sex life. Let's explore. So, before we start talking about arousal, we need to talk about being comfortable within your own body. As a transgender person, this is something that I have personally struggled with. I continue to struggle with it sometimes, but it is something that you can actively work on. And if you don't work on it and you're not feeling comfortable within your own body, then you're not going to be comfortable with anybody else seeing it, including yourself. It's normal for most people to not actually be present within their own bodies, right? They observe themselves. When you look in the mirror, you're not experiencing or admiring yourself in the mirror. You're evaluating, right? You're critiquing, you're building a list in your head of things that you would change. And you start to ask yourself questions like, oh, do I need to suck in? Should I stand up straighter? What does this angle look like? Should I face this way or should I face that way? And do I look like that person I saw online who was super hot? As soon as you start doing that, and the reason that building that confidence within your own body before showing it to anyone else matters, is because while you're doing that evaluating and that critiquing, you've already left your body. You're not present within yourself. You are standing on the outside, looking in with your little clipboard of things that you want to change. And this is something, like I said, you can work on, but it takes patience. And the first thing you have to accept is that it's not about body confidence straight away, right? That is a lofty goal. What we want to achieve first is neutrality. You want to get to a point where you can look at yourself in the mirror and observe yourself and not be making that list in your head or asking yourself those critical questions. It's not about looking in the mirror and thinking, oh my God, I am the hottest person alive. You just need to get to a place where you're not at war with yourself. Now, some practical things that you can do to achieve this. The first one is spend time naked with no agenda, right? You're not getting naked because you're about to have sex. You're not getting naked because you're about to masturbate. You're not getting naked because you're about to have a shower. You're just naked. If you've never stood in your backyard or your veranda and had a naked cup of coffee and just enjoyed the vitamin D from the sun, start there. It is incredible. And then once you start to get more comfortable with that, you can move on to touching yourself without an agenda. Get to know your body physically with your hands, again, with no agenda. touch yourself without actively trying to turn yourself on. And what we're trying to do with this is get familiar with our bodies in a neutral state, because the more you can build that awareness becomes second nature. When you do move into arousal and getting turned on, the awareness remains. And you're taking the focus away from how do I look, and instead putting it into how does this feel? So I'm going to leave that homework with you. You're going to do that, you're going to practice it, and then we can start looking at arousal. So now that we're present within our own bodies, the first thing that we have to relearn is that arousal is not a light switch. It doesn't have an on off button, it's not something you can just flick. It's something that you build, right? Arousal is built. You don't wait for it patiently. Like I said, there's a difference between being horny and being turned on. Being horny, light switch, happens like that. Being physically aroused takes some time. And there's actually a technical term for this. It's called responsive desire, as opposed to spontaneous desire, right? Spontaneous desire is that horniness. It's that feeling that grips you all of a sudden and says, yep, it's time. Responsive desire is something that happens afterwards. So, especially for women, arousal is something that starts after you begin engaging, not before. Before is the horniness. That's the invitation for arousal. There are those blocks there that we've discussed before, right? And number one is feeling safe, mentally and physically. If you have safety, then you can have a physical response. You don't get one without the other. The other one is stress. Stress, distraction, external pressures, they're all arousal killers. If you're not feeling safe, your body is not open to sensation. And this is why we talked last time about masturbation being self-care, because it is. And it's also practice. You're getting to know your own body, and it's your opportunity to experiment with things like light versus firm pressure, rhythm, fast, slow, or like we mentioned, stillness, just a constant pressure instead of any speed whatsoever, and erogenous zones, location, where you're touching yourself. You don't always have to go for the most obvious spot first, like we said, and obviously, accept, like we said, that your body's not always going to respond to the same thing the same way. What worked yesterday might not work today, and that's okay. That's why we experiment. Remember that your body is not a button, it's not a remote control that you can just switch on, switch off. It's a network. And then obviously, the deeper that understanding of your own body gets, and the more aware you are of how your own arousal mechanisms work, the easier it's going to be when you're not by yourself. You can actually have conversations with your partners around exactly what you like, when you like it, and how you like it. But there is one major thing that always creeps its way in that is getting in the way of all of that. It's getting in the way of the body confidence. It's getting in the way of getting to know your own body. It's rushing. We live time poor lives, and we are used to everything needing to be done as soon as possible. Like we talked about in the masturbation as self-care episode, a lot of people take the approach of it's got to be quick, it's got to be quiet, and that's conditioning, right? You're teaching your body that that's the only way it gets to experience pleasure is if it's quick and it's quiet, it doesn't get in the way of the rest of your day, which leads to that mindset of thinking about pleasure as a task, as something on your to-do list. Like, yes, today I must come, tick, done, perfect. The simplest way you can start to reframe this in your head is just ask yourself, when have you ever been able to rush yourself into relaxation? I'm going to hazard a guess and say never. It's pretty hard to be relaxed while you're in a rush. So we're doing this practice so that we can reframe it, we can be more aware and present in our bodies, and we can get rid of that countdown timer. Countdown out the window. No more. I've got 10 minutes before I've got to leave to meet my friends for coffee or whatever it might be, or I should be there already. That's an instant mood killer. We're not trying to get there faster, we're trying to feel more along the way to getting there at all. And since we're talking about taking your time and not rushing, this is where we get to talk about something that absolutely flips the script on it: edging. Now, if you haven't heard of edging before, it's pretty basic. It's building arousal, getting yourself close to the point of climax, and then gently easing off and starting the process again. It might sound counterintuitive, but I'm going to explain why it's great. But before I do, it's important to realize that there is a difference between edging and denial. Denial is a practice of only being allowed to bring yourself to the cusp and then having to stop. And you don't necessarily build again, or you might, but you never actually give yourself the release. That's denial. This is edging. So edging is similar, except you get to come at the end. Not saying that denial isn't something that can be enjoyable for some people. It's, instead of edging for an hour, you might practice denial for a month, right? So it's all, again, it's about building that tension over time instead of rushing through it. Giving yourself permission to take that time and to build tension slowly instead of rushing means that you're building awareness. The more times you bring yourself close to the edge, the more aware you are of how that build-up actually works and how it feels. You're increasing sensitivity, so the more you stimulate certain areas of your body, the more sensitive they become over time. And you're taking something beautiful, you're taking sexual pleasure, and you're extending it, right? Why experience pleasure for 10 minutes when you could experience it for an hour? Hell, 2 hours. It's a Sunday afternoon, you've got no plans. Let's take our time with this. We're going to experience pleasure all afternoon. Why not? One more important distinction. We talked about denial and the difference between denial and edging. There is another experience called ruining, or a ruined orgasm. A ruined orgasm is when you do bring yourself over the edge, but then you stop immediately, very abruptly. You bring yourself to the edge, you teeter over, and then you stop completely. That's called ruining. Again, totally valid experience to have if you want to have that experience, but it's not edging. So if you are going to experiment with this, remember that you're slowing down, not stopping entirely. And you don't need to be dramatic about it. If the worst thing that can happen if you accidentally don't slow down fast enough and take yourself over the edge is an orgasm. And we encourage orgasms here. So if the worst thing that can happen is you come, that's a pretty good outcome. Slow down, don't just stop. And if that's difficult for you in practice, instead of just slowing down, you can try changing the rhythm or the pressure to reduce the stimulation instead of stopping, continuing to do the same thing. And through it all, one of the most important elements to be aware of and focusing on is your breath. Slowing down your breath slows your heart rate is what we're aiming for. Again, not just stopping suddenly. And in my experience, edging is actually one of the best ways to get to know your own body. And like I said, that's going to be improving your partnered sex experiences as well, because you're not focusing on the end at all. The whole exercise is about the build up. It's all about building up over time. You will find yourself not even thinking about the end. And I love it because it gives you that ability to be aware of that build up when you're present in your own body, whether it's, during partnered sex. You feel that build up happening, you know it's coming, which means that you can communicate it to your partner, you can control it, you can let them control it, and you can start enjoying that experience together. So, bringing it all back together, we're not talking about doing more, we're talking about understanding more. We're getting comfortable with being in our own bodies, being naked, touching yourself without an agenda. We're learning how our bodies respond to arousal and what that build up actually feels like. We are getting rid of the countdown timer and we are focusing on exploration instead of performance. Don't expect to adopt or try edging and be a complete pro at it, right? Like I said, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to come, and that's so fine. If this is the first time you're trying it, maybe it's the first time you're hearing about it at all. It's totally fine to suck at it. As always, any questions, jump on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and if you want to watch the video that goes along with these episodes, it'll be up on YouTube. I'll see you next time.